Welcome back to Red Spring Wildlife Park. Now we have our first habitat in and our first load of guests. We now have some extra cash thanks to the donations from our guests, and we're now able to expand into a second habitat, and we're going to build a pretty cool grand entrance. Jumping straight into the entrance, so I want to build this over the paths that I laid out in the very first episode. If you haven't caught up on that one, I'll leave a little card at the top. It's a pretty cool episode, it's nice and chilled out. It's not as long-winded as my previous episodes, it's a bit more in-depth, it's more of a tutorial on how to get a franchise up and running. So, going back to the build, like I said in the last one, I only really want to be using stuff from like the Australian Animal Pack and the Oceania Animal Pack, which both of these packs are actually available on my Instant Gaming link at a very discounted price. So if you wanted to pick them up, if you've not already, I know the Australia one's a little bit older than the Oceania one, but they've both got some amazing animals and some pretty cool scenery pieces, so I would highly recommend grabbing them. Okay, and then what I'm doing with the build here is I'm using the Australian wood, because like I said in the last episode, I really like this against the kind of like red rock background that we've got. So I've used the 2 meters, the arch pieces, and the 1 meters. So I've used the 2 meters and the arches along the back, so this is going to be like the entrance where they walk under, and then at the front I've only used the 1 meter pieces because I'm going to fill them with planters, so I've done them quite low. I'm going to fill them with mulch and add some like local plants and some rockery and stuff, just to give it a nice little bit of texture. It needs obviously a little bit of greenery at the entrance, I think, and then we're going to add a little bit of lettering in the middle as well. Okay, and then we're having a tiny little rule break, so I'm hopping out of the Australian pack and I'm going into the conservation pack because I want to use this cladding because it works really well with this type of wood. So what I'm doing here is I'm just literally recolouring them just so they've got like that Australian colour, because it is actually a flexi colour item, so you can have it whichever colour you want. And then I'm just sinking them into the wall and I'm just using that as essentially like a secondary wall above my 2 meter. And I'm going to take that all the way across just so it's all in line with the very top of the building. And just another tip here, I know I've not done it here, but it's just if you ever do it. So to get stuff completely flush to a grid wall, so obviously the cladding isn't a grid item, so it's just kind of free floating. I don't know what the official term is, I think it's just like an off grid. If you actually align to surface and then turn your angle snap on, you can literally just kind of flip it over and sink it in and it'll be completely flush to the wall, and you can carry that all the way over. It won't be off angle because it's all nicely lined up, so it's just a good way to kind of get everything all lined up. And then just hopping the section into speed build. So what I'm doing is I'm literally just kind of creating the archway that the guests are going to walk through. So where I've got the existing arch, I'm just adding 2 more pieces of the same item next to it, and then I'm just going straight on top with the roof. So I'm just going to speed through this bit because it's quite repetitive. Obviously I've got the base down, so I'm going to be using the iron roofs from the Australian pack, so the same ones that we're going to use around the zoo. Quite a lot of the items are going to make quite good reoccurrences. Like I said, I want to keep as much in the pack as I can, so I want it to be solely using stuff from those 2 packs because that's the continent it comes from. But that's pretty much what we're going to go with, and I think it works quite nicely. I quite like the look of it. So on to the lettering. So I've had a little play around with a couple of the fonts in the game. Some of them were too small, some of them were too kind of cartoony, so I've gone with this one because it's quite sleek, it's nice and straight. So we're not going to put Red Spring Wildlife here, we're just going to label it as Zoo, and then we're going to get them all recoloured into the existing colour palette that we've got going at the minute. And this is an overview of what we've built, so I'm quite happy with this. So straight on to the plants and the trees that we're going to add. So we're only going to add these as like a placeholder for now. So I'm going to add a couple of cabbage trees because I quite like those. I've used a couple throughout the series, which you will see as we go on. So I'm just going to pop these into the planters, and then at a later date we're going to come back and we're going to add the mulch and get all the plants in there and the rocks. Okay, so over to the guest facilities. Obviously these generate a really good income, so we're going to get these decorated. We're going to add a building around them, just make it more of like a shell because it's just an in-game item at the minute. So again, we're filtering down to the Australian pack and we're using the corrugated iron. So I'm just going to colour that to a colour that I'm quite happy with and one that fits in with the surrounding areas. And then we're filling out the back of the shops with the Australian wood pieces. So I'm using like the tunnel pieces just for easy life, and then I'm just filling in the ends just so it's easier just to kind of place it all down, and then you only have to use a couple of pieces. And then on the top we're just using a shallow roof and we're going back in with the corrugated iron from the Australian Animal Pack. I think for me, like when I'm using my creativity and creating these zoos, I like to have like continuity throughout them. So I like to use the same kind of building themes. I kind of stick and make like a palette and kind of expand that, and then some buildings obviously won't have that same palette, they'll be completely separate. Like the staff facilities, we're going to do it a little bit different. But where we're at the minute, obviously I've only released episode 2 as of now, but in the background I'm working on him pretty much every night. So I've got about 9 episodes, and I must say it's getting pretty good. So if you want to stick around, you need to be hitting that subscribe button, and I guarantee you're going to enjoy it because it's quite a fun little series. I've really enjoyed doing it, to be quite honest. And I really hope you guys are enjoying it as well. It's something different. We usually go for just like a standard biome. I've never really like pushed it out and done like the grasslands of Africa or like the outback like we're doing here. I've always just done like tropical or temperate in Europe or North America. So it's nice to have something different. It's nice to work with different conditions and different elements. And I just want to say thank you as well whilst I'm here for the lovely comments on the last episode. I got some really good information off a couple of my subscribers. Definitely want to say thank you to Sparrow and that Aussie bloke. They did drop some really good information kind of highlighting like the Australian wildlife. So I'm going to kind of take that and use it within this zoo. So I kind of want it to be like an educational thing as well. So I've got quite a good idea and I've kind of gone over it in the comments. I've not given too much away, but it's there if you read between the lines, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And then in the background here, what I'm making is just like a little water feature. I was going to use this for like a very small kind of aviary or something, but I'm not going to touch on that at the minute because obviously I need to get the finances stable, I need real animals. So I'm just going to make it like a little show. It's going to be a little pond, almost like a water feature. We're going to add some kind of like stuff around it, just so it's a nice little focal point as soon as you walk into the zoo. Somewhere you can kind of sit by. Okay, so the second animal we are adding to Red Spring Wildlife will be the emu. So we've got this really cool space here. It kind of fits in really nicely. So I want there to be quite a large off-show area, and then I want there to be like 2 separate pens, but they're going to be open at all times. So we're only going to keep males. We're not going to have it as like a breeding program. It's just going to be purely rescue. So obviously whilst I was kind of thinking, what animal could we put here? I thought emus would be the perfect one to go there. They've got some pretty cool facts behind them. So emus are actually the second largest bird in the world. So they can stand up to around 2 meters tall, which is pretty tall. That's taller than me. The speed, they can run up to about 31 miles per hour. So they're pretty speedy boys. And then they are completely flightless, but they do use their wings to kind of like steer and cool themselves down when they're running at top speeds. So I don't know if you've ever seen them where they do that like weird dance, similar to what like ostriches do. I think they're actually kind of similar to the ostrich in that respect. But their diet, it's just mainly like plants, insects. They eat a couple of different flowers. They'll pick at seeds, grasses, any kind of fruits they find. So obviously Planet Zoo is going to be brilliant for that. We can add some pretty cool foliage. We can kind of imitate that there's like berries and stuff on the bushes. So they are from Australia, obviously they're going into Red Spring Wildlife. So when emus mate, they actually mate for life. So once they've found a partner, obviously presuming that partner stays alive, they will stay with them for the duration of their life. And it is actually the male that incubates the egg. So the male will actually incubate the egg for about 60 days. So they're just some pretty cool facts that I found when I was kind of looking through. I did have another idea for an animal, but we're going to add them at a later stage. But we're sticking with the emus because they're pretty cool. So we're just going to have a small little population, purely rescues. It's going to be a nice little rescue centre. We're going to make it pretty cool so the guests can kind of go up to him, not get too close because obviously we don't want injuries. We need to think of health and safety as well. Okay, so hope you enjoyed them pretty cool facts about the emus. So I'm just finishing up the null barriers around the side of the enclosure. I like to use null barriers as much as possible. Obviously when you're first starting out, it's not, I don't want to say it's not possible, but it's a good idea to use the in-game barriers to get used to it if you are just starting out. Obviously when you get a little bit more experienced, obviously I'm no expert, I've only been playing about a year compared to like the absolute veterans of Planet Zoo. I do like to use null barriers sometimes. I just think for the more realistic stuff, it looks really cool. Obviously sometimes you can make the in-game barriers look quite realistic as well. I've done that in a couple in the future, which you'll see. So yeah, it's just null barriers for this one. And it's time to purchase our emus. So we're just heading into the animal market. So as you can see, some of these are quite expensive. We're not going to use the conservation credits, we are just going to purchase them with cash. Some of them haven't got the best stats, but we're going to pick out the best of a bad bunch, and that sounds really bad, but we're going to pick the ones with the okay-ish stats. So that one there, they were all pretty much orange, we're going to go with that. The longevity of this one is in the red, but it's not too much of a concern. And then it's just kind of a toss up between these two, and then if we go with the top one, obviously its size isn't the greatest, but that doesn't have much of a bearing on anything, to be quite honest. So we're just going to filter down in the Animal Trade Centre and get them popped straight into the quarantine. So obviously we're treating these as rescues, so in any normal zoo they would go straight to the quarantine. So obviously we're going to make no exceptions for Planet Zoo. It's going to be business as usual, straight into the quarantine. They're going to have all their checks. We're going to make sure that they're ready to be released into their paddock, and then once they're ready and the vets sign them off, they'll be straight in. And then what we're doing here is we're just connecting this path up to the staff hub that we created in the last episode, and that snapped together so nicely. I was so satisfied when that happened. I don't know why, it's the most simplest piece of path, but it was just perfection how that snapped together. Okay, and I'm going to pop this next section into speed build. I'm going to let you relax with the lovely music of Planet Zoo, and I'm just going to finish off the roof and start adding a couple of the enrichment items, and then we'll hop back when they actually arrive at their enclosure. Okay, so our emus have started arriving. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into the heat map and go to the animal tab and then check their traversable area. So you can do that just by clicking on the animal. It will just show you like a blue map where it can traverse around the habitat. I just want to make sure there's no escapes, because obviously escapes wouldn't be very good for the start of the zoo. But they're all good in this habitat, so we'll jump straight back into the speed build and I will catch you at the end. Okay, and that is the habitat done. So I'm jumping straight into the education. Obviously that is very important. I'm going to keep preaching about that every episode, because the more educated the guests are, the more they'll spend, so we need their education to be as high as possible. So using the education map, you can kind of just hit the H key on your keyboard. Console players, I'm not sure what it is, but if you open the heat map, you will see like the education radius. You want to make sure they're evenly placed, and you want to make sure that your donation bins are within them radiuses. So that's the education boards, the audios, talk points, all those kind of things. You can spread them around and then just make sure that your donation bins are inside. And then obviously as they're getting education, they will then donate to that cause, which is what we want. Okay, so since last episode, so I know I mentioned previously that I've not actually had a chance to play around with the new Zookeeper animal pack. So lo and behold, we've actually added one to the zoo further down the line. I'm not going to tell you which one. It fits in quite nicely. We built a pretty cool area on the left hand side of the zoo. Don't worry, we will get there. And I am very, very happy with what I've created. I was going to give you a clue then, but I'm going to keep you guessing. I'm going to keep dropping guesses throughout the series to keep everyone guessing. But yeah, I really hope that you are enjoying this series. Just a quick reminder, hit that subscribe button just to keep in line with it. Likes, comments, all of those are also appreciated. I do also need name suggestions as well. I did get 2 suggestions which I will hop onto at the end of this video. So that Aussie bloke on YouTube has actually dropped 2 name suggestions for the koalas. They have had a baby, so I will show that as well at the end. But we'll go in and we'll get those renamed at the end, so thank you for your suggestion. Okay, so just hopping in from the future, I'm just going to crop that out there because I don't want you to see what's coming next. So I'm just going to rename these guys. So I had a suggestion from that Aussie bloke. So I've got a good idea. So I'm going to call the male one Bill. And then we're going... Oh, that didn't go. Let's just rename that again. Bill. Right, enter. And then the female is going to be called Blinky. So this is an Australian TV programme. So thank you for those 2 name suggestions. And we'll hop straight back to the emus. Okay, so now the previous episode animals have now been renamed. I will also need 3 names for the emus, so if you've got any cool names, doesn't matter how ridiculous, I'm open to all suggestions. If you want to call one Ice Cream, you want to call one Haribo, I don't mind. Whichever, the choice is completely yours. If not, they'll just stick with their in-game names. I didn't actually check what they were, but I'm sure they're completely random like all the other ones are. And if you're also wondering what is going to be happening with Cattleview Farm and Zoo, it's not finished, which is good news. However, it is coming to the end of its time. So I plan to only have about 4 more animals in that zoo. So that's going to kind of pick up in between this series. It's not my priority anymore to finish that as quickly as I was going, but obviously this one now will take priority as well as Planet Coaster 2, which comes out next week. So obviously I'll be dividing my time up on Planet Coaster 2 and Planet Zoo. I'm not sure if this is at the end for Planet Zoo with this DLC that's just came out. I'm hoping not. We've got a Frontier unlocked this week, but I imagine it's just going to announce some console bundles or something. I can't really see us having any more DLCs. I would love to have more, but I've just got a feeling whatever the community wants, they are going to be saving that for Planet Zoo 2. So similar to what they did with Planet Coaster, kind of took people's stuff on board and then implemented it into that game. So I'm hoping they can kind of use Planet Coaster 2 as like a basis with the pathing and stuff on there, because that looks pretty cool. And I'm hoping we do get birds, aviaries and some more aquatic animals. I think that'd be really fun for like a second follow-on game. But all we can do is hope and pray and hope they make a solid game if and when it comes out. Okay, so we're now in a position to start adding some more guest facilities. So most importantly, we need a toilet. Every franchise zoo will need this. I know sandbox mode isn't too strict on that. I think you can turn off guest needs in sandbox mode, but obviously we've got it on. We've got to look after the guests in this. So I'm just going to get all these aligned up. Obviously the align to grid isn't going to work as expected, so just use the path that's already there if you're doing a similar kind of build to this. They'll all snap together and then they'll snap straight into the main path. So don't worry if you can't get the grids all aligned, just literally use what's there. Just repath it and do what you need to do. I am going to enclose this little toilet block inside some of the corrugated iron because I think it works quite nicely. I was going to follow on the same theme as the entrance, but then I thought if we have something a little bit different, corrugated iron works quite well for like toilets. It's obviously by the entrance, so it's going to be the main kind of toilet block. And then obviously we've got that little gap there which we can fill in at a later date, we don't need to do that at the minute. And then same again, little shallow roof, and we're just going to use exactly the same roofing we've been using throughout the zoo. So again we're going to use the Australian iron pieces from that pack, because they work the best and that's pretty much what we need. But I'm going to try and add like a bit of an unusual kind of style roof to this, similar to what we did with the emu house, so kind of having two, I'm not sure, I think it's a gable on each side and then we're going to have a drop and then a flat roof in the middle. I think that adds quite a bit of character to these. I know it's only a toilet, but it's trying to make it look as cool as we can. And then just adding in the flat roof here, and I think it just adds a bit more character. Obviously there's only so much character you can add to a toilet, but you can make it as basic or extravagant as you want. Obviously I'm just going for a very kind of basic, and then we're just adding in the toilet signs here, just so obviously as people go past, these don't have any bearing on the game, they go to the element that's inside. But obviously just for almost like a realism point, we're going to add these in. It would be best if you could kind of switch them, so you could have like male on one side and the female on the other. I would like to see that, but without using the in-game shapes I don't think it's possible. I guess you could kind of flip them round, but then it's just going to be a mirror kind of thing. So okay, and that is it for today's episode. If you have enjoyed that one, subscribe, drop a like down below, also comment as well. I also need some names, let me know what you want to see next. I'm curious to see if anybody does get it right. Hopefully I get some cool name suggestions down below, but if not, then like I say, they'll just stick with their in-game names. So I'm going to leave you with some cinematics here. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye bye.